Okay, as long as you can hear me without the headphones, and that's fine. I had the headphones on, so maybe that's what it was.
I was reading your bio. Let me finish your bio real quick for TikTok. Some people are listening over here. So it says, in 2014, Andrew was presented with the Southeast Regional Special Recognition Award for exceptional service and outstanding contributions to the affirmative action program. In 1995, Andrew graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in business management from Western New England College. In 2005, Andrew received his master's degree in criminology from Central Connecticut State University. Andrew is a retired Air Force veteran with over 22 years of active and reserve service. He is the host of the 313 Men, Money, and Marriage podcast. Andrew is married with 2 children and spends time mentoring adolescent boys in a mentoring program. Wow, that's awesome. A lot of good stuff there. I'm really excited for this episode. I said about 5 times before, I was like, I really hope we can get him in here because I'm really excited to do something a little bit different. Usually we have people in recovery on here telling their story, which I love that. But I always like to hear, different perspectives and views and all this stuff. So this is kind of coming more from a clinician standpoint, and I'm, so I'm really excited to do that.
Absolutely.
So, so now I've read your bio. Everyone kind of knows a little bit about you, and I'm just going to kind of let you take the floor. I take notes, and I'll kind of ask questions as we go. And then at the end, when you're finished talking, if we have time left, we'll come back and ask questions.
Oh, sure. Yeah, basically what ended up happening is...
I'm sorry, if at any time anybody out here has any questions for Andrew, please just pop them into the comments, the chat, and I'll ask him. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, basically what happened was I had started working in the prison system, and I started off as just like a regular correction officer. Then I went into general counseling. And then after being in almost 10 years, I had found out that I qualified to be a substance abuse counselor. Now, the trick was with this, I had never really done much with substance abuse counseling other than working sort of on a per diem basis at a facility in the Northeast that you were more of a sort of like a mentor in a facility where some people were using, some weren't. It was sort of like a mixed bag of things, but that was my only really experience. So I remember when I was getting hired and I told the person who was going to be my supervisor, I said, I don't really have a whole lot of experience with substance abuse counseling. And he said, well, we'll teach you how to do that. He says, we'll show you how to do substance abuse counseling. Don't worry about that. He says, you're qualified for the position. So we'll put it in place. And when I got down there, they did. And it took about roughly 6 months to get the footing and knowing exactly what you were doing. You had to go through a few cycles of treatment with people. And so I had a caseload of about maybe 25 different inmates inside the prison, basically, clients. And I also had to run groups. So I had 2 groups a day, and I had 25 inmates I was responsible for that were assigned specifically to me. Then after about 6 years of doing that, 5 to 6 years, I started teaching them how to transition from the community after they, completed some of the stuff with the program. And the program was a 9-month program. That the last portion of the program I would do, and that was called we would transition them, getting them prepared to be released to go, back into the community. Now, throughout this whole period of time, just to let you know, I was a little reluctant to do this because I felt that my experience, I had, a lack of experience. I had more of I guess they say the education experience, but not realizing it, because growing up, in the New York area, I had a front row seat to all kind of substance use. So I didn't think that would make me be able to be a counselor. But when you combine that with the education, it really started to make sense.
Yeah, now, I love that. I know, like my nephew, he grew up, he had, his mom was addict. He's been in and out of foster care stuff. And he was recently talking to me about pursuing something and he was like, I don't know, like if I qualify, because he's never been an addict. And I was like, no, dude, you have been through it. Like he had a front row seat to, like, he can understand the experience. I think it would be something wonderful. So I'm really glad that, he's in the room. So I'm kind of glad that he's hearing this right now.
Yeah, you know what's so funny is because I'm older, you know, I'm in my mid 50s basically. I got a front row. When I say a front row seat, being in the New York area, the crack cocaine epidemic was starting right when I was going into high school. So I saw the transition of, you know, people and neighborhoods and everything changing dramatically, because back then the drug was a lot stronger than it is today. And so I saw that firsthand, and I saw certain things that I wish I hadn't seen, but it was really rough in those early stages. Now I'm gonna flash back a little bit here, just because I want to share sort of a story with the audience here and you. Is way back when I was about 11 years old, and I was in the 6th grade. I had a friend of mine who was 2 grades ahead of me. He was in the 8th grade, and he had told these other 2 8th graders that me and this 6th grader can beat you in a 2-on-2 game of basketball. And he said to them, he says, and not only will we beat you, but we'll bet you $5. So he came to me after school and said, hey, meet me at the basketball court. We're going to play these guys for $5. And I says, well, wait a second. I can't play him for $5. And he says, why not? I says, I don't have $5. So he says, well, then you better win. So we started playing these games, you know, and older kids can, you know, be the peer pressure and everything. So we're playing this game. Everyone is watching it because they know that there's money involved. And we end up winning the game. I make a lucky shot at the end. It banks off of the backboard and goes in, and we win. I get all this praise because I'm this 6th grader beating these 8th graders with the other. And so it was a big moment for me. But here's the caveat to this, and how I ended up in drug treatment, which makes this such a crazy story. One of the guys I played against ended up selling this drug from the 80s, you know, the crack basically, ended up getting a lot of time in prison over the course of time. He did a lot of I think, and I'm not 100% certain, but he might have fell under the 3 strikes rule of felonies. The other guy actually got on the drug at one point and got on it for a while and got really sick at one point. And the guy who played with me, when he was 20 years old, he ended up losing his life. He had an altercation with the police. So the only one who pretty much survived intact out of that game was myself. And I ended up being a substance abuse counselor. If that, you know, so it just goes to show you, you don't know how things are going to turn out. But literally, since I was the only one left, you know, I really felt like maybe this was a calling and I didn't know it.
This easily went down the same path they did. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's so crazy. You know, God is good. Yes. You know.
So the last part, just to clear up what I was doing when I was working there inside the prison setting, is there was several different things I would do. Now, just to give your audience some clarification, I counseled both male and female inmates. So it wasn't just male inmates. I counseled everybody, and I worked all custody levels. So one thing I would do is near the end of my career, say the last 5 to 10 years, I would do individual groups, and I would do more non-residential treatment versus before I was doing residential treatment. And so I would have smaller groups of say 10 to 15, and we would meet weekly. And I just put them in certain scenarios and see how they would handle different things. Because one of the biggest things with substance use, which a lot of people don't talk about, and I would share this with the women, is the first question I would ask them before we would even start, I would ask them, how many of you are in here because of a man that you were in a relationship with? And literally 75% of them would raise their hand. It never failed. I mean, it was always that big, you know, a very high number. So I always looked at it like, you know, I think relationships play such a huge role in dealing with substance use. Like I think the relationships who we have, you know, they always say the people who are, you know, your 5 closest friends, basically, you're going to be the average of them. I think that does matter to an extent when it comes to that. I really believe that. So a lot of them just were in very bad relationships substance use was, prevalent in the relationship, and it led them into where they ultimately ended up. And so I really think, when they make those cliche statements, it's about people, places, and things, it's a cliche, but it's actually true. So the people who we hang out with, the people who we associate with, make a huge difference as to whether or not we're going to use in the first place, if we're in recovery, not go back, and all of those different things play a part in it. So that's something that we have to, as counselors, I would tell people you have to have a good support system. The ones who had the best support systems generally did the best. They usually did the best in recovery and didn't recidivate as much as some of the other ones did. So that support system is probably, I would say, is one of the most important things that you have to have if you're going to beat this. And one thing I'll share really quickly too, we used to always say, I would say, should thinking is the number one cause of anger, and anger is the number one cause of relapse. So if you're in recovery, the best thing to do is not fluctuate and worry about how things should be or what should happen, and try not to be angry all the time, because that's going to lead you back down to that path.
It's huge, and especially I've said 100 times, my triggers and things are tied deeply to my emotions, and
Yes.
my primary go-to, even still, I go there and I have to always step back. I'm learning, trying more and more every day to always step back, because my initial response is almost always anger. So I definitely can see that. And, I think it's really important to be able to, identify and think. And I know you said something else too, about, putting yourself in I'm really big. I was just talking earlier about temptation. If we don't put ourselves in those situations, that definitely can happen, right? If you put yourself in the situation, you may get by once, you may get by 10 times, you may get by for you, but I would eventually give in. I know, because I did it. When I came home from prison one time, and my brother was still using, and I continued to put myself around him, and he was just openly used, right in front of me, and I thought I could handle it, right? I was tougher than that, and it was all my ego, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, I can handle it, but I couldn't. And eventually, it was fine one time. It was fine for 6 months, and then eventually one day I was having a bad day, and he was just doing his thing, and I was like, oh, hey, that'll make me feel better, And so that's why now I've learned, I don't put myself around the temptation at all, because if I do, it's only a matter of time. So
yes.
I love that. So you talked about, let's see, in 2014 that you won an award. What was that?
Yes. Yeah. What happened was that was a regional award. And it's a Southeast Regional Award, and it basically had to do with me working on different committees. I was in charge of the cultural diversity and what they now call DEI, which is turned into some sort of a bad thing, which is surprising to me. But it, it really isn't. We didn't call it DEI back then. We just called it cultural diversity. So I did that, and I also helped with the recruiting, trying to recruit people into the institution not just our institution, but the whole entire, throughout the prison system that we were working in. I was, assigned to do that. And so we'd have to go to different areas and locations and, just try to recruit people in. So because of that, working in that, and then also being the Hispanic program manager, even though I'm technically not Hispanic, I was doing 3 things at one time. So they gave me a reward, and I was fortunate enough to go to New York, back to my hometown, and I got to meet some pretty famous people. I got to got to basically meet Jennifer Lopez, and also got to see Michelle Obama speak as well. So I was very fortunate for getting that. So it was great. It was, something I still carry some of that stuff around with me. So it was 10, almost 11 years ago now, but 12 now, coming up is 2026. I keep losing track.
My daughter was born in 2014. Yeah, she'll be 12 this year. So
yeah.
Awesome. You also talked about that we already kind of touched on that you have your master's degree. I think that's really admirable that you went. How many years of college did you do?
Well, it's funny when I I got the bachelor's degree in 95. I got hired on with the prison in late 96. And then I started to go back to school in late 98. Now you say, well, why did it take 7 years to get your master's degree, right? Well, what ended up happening was I was almost finished. And then there was this little small thing called 9/11 that happened. And I was in the reserves and my unit got called up. So I was away for a little while. And then I came back, and the only thing I had to do was the thesis. And I did my thesis on female inmates and psychotropic medication. Yeah, and it did good. It was the university has it on file and everything. It did well, and I completed it. And so once I completed it in that, and combined with taking a couple more classes that were considered substance abuse classes, is what qualified me to become a substance abuse counselor inside. And then once I became the counselor, I started to work on certifications and stuff like that to make sure I can continue to do it. So that's how that whole thing happened. But yeah, so to answer your question directly, it was probably a normal master's degree you can probably finish in about 2. So I was taking my time because I was working. So I was only taking a class here, sometimes 2 classes, different things like that. So I was in no hurry because I was already working. So it took me probably a little bit longer than it should have, but I did complete it. You know, it just took a while.
I was just curious whether it was like 10 years between the.
Oh yeah. Well, I took time off, and then I took my time when I started working on it, and then the 9/11 thing happened. So yeah, it's just I didn't go directly right after, you know.
That's awesome. And the military service was the next thing that I was going to touch on. So that's really awesome. And you've answered that you got called up for 9/11. And is that the only time that you served actively?
No. I did active duty first right out of high school. And I served for over 7 years, maybe 7.5 years. I served. Yeah, it's about 7.5 years.
That's awesome.
So then I got out and I went into the reserves after I got out of active duty, and I just thought, oh, I'm just going to do the reserve thing. I go part-time. Then 9/11 happened, and I was sort of back on full-time. So I thought I was done, but I really wasn't.
How long did you stay during 9/11?
I was activated for a year, and then I had to stay for a couple more months, like about 3 more months after that. So I think it was about maybe 15 months. Nice. About somewhere around there.
Service.
Yeah, thank you.
And the next thing that I was going to ask about was your podcast. So you actually do your own podcast. It looks like it's called the 313 Men, Money, and Marriage podcast. Yes. That podcast is more. I've been doing it for I think 3 years now, somewhere around there. I've lost track. But I couldn't. What was going to happen was I was going to do something related to the field of work I was in. But because I was still technically working in a prison setting, I could not for ethical purposes. So I says, let me do something different. So I wanted to just discuss things like men, money, and marriage, because the 3 to me all are intertwined and go together. And, you know, we get a lot of content out here that's basically anti-marriage, and I do the exact opposite. So I think that people should try to get married to someone, just simply because using it from the man's point of view, because as you know, we call it men, money, and marriage, is that when we're married, we tend to live longer. We tend to have more net worth. That's where the money part comes in, you know, and as us being men, it just makes more sense. Now, the hardest thing is who you pick. And so we try to help people pick the right person to get married to, because a lot of the things that you see going on now today in modern day dating and all of this stuff is the aesthetic is the most important thing right now versus the characters of a person. So it's like everyone has, well, I can't date or marry this person because they're not my type. I says, well, you're never going to marry your type, because there's nobody that's ever going to fit exactly what you want. Right. You know, but we have these things where we really believe that we can get 100% of what we want just because we want it. And it doesn't work that way. What I used to do inside the prison and counseling, I would tell the groups, especially with the women, I would do this. I would say, I want you to give me your top 5 wants that you would like to have in a husband.
And they were enthusiastic. They would start writing it down on the paper and getting it 5 months. And I said, good, you got them? They said, yeah. I said, okay, cross out 2 of them. You guys cross out 2. It can be any 2, but just cross those 2 out. And they would be reluctantly, they would do it. I said, congratulations. And they say, what? I said, that's your husband. Because that's if you get about 60% of what you want, you did good. But people think 60% is bad. And so it's so much to it. It's like I remember I did an episode about being average, and hardly anybody listened to it because everyone thinks they're above average. So then I wasn't talking to them, but I say, 60% of our country basically is not middle category. We're average. It's just no one wants to admit it. But 77% think that they're above average, and there lies the problem.
And I love that you said, like, I think people like, I think people like before they're married, like we don't really know what we should look for in a partner, and I love this podcast because I think like that's kind of what it sounds to me like what you're doing is like kind of educating people on like what is really important, because at the end of the day, aesthetic looks outside. That's not really that, and that changes. Your outside can change so frequently, right? So like, is that really the most important thing, And I think that it's also important that people nowadays don't think that like marriages are hard, they're not supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to always be sunshine and rainbows, like couples have fights. That happens. Like, sometimes things get bad, but like the important part to me is the most important part of marriage is that like finding somebody that you can work through it with,
Yes. And that's the key to it right there. It's just you finding that right person. It's the person that you end up with is the one that I liken it really quick. I'll just say this. I liken it to a trial lawyer, getting ready to go to trial. Half the battle of winning is picking the right jury. Well, I always say half the battle with a marriage is picking the right partner. You have to have the right person with you. And if you don't, marriage would not be fun at all. Yeah. So you have to have the right person. And if you don't, it can lead you. Don't go for all of the aesthetics. Don't go for the materialism. Don't go for the transactions of it. Oh, he can buy this or she do that. Don't do that, because it's not gonna last. Yeah. If you do that.
Yeah, and learn as you go, and people can grow and change too. Like, I don't know. I think, but yeah, I love that. That's what I didn't know that's what your podcast was about. I just assumed that it was something to do with counseling or something like that. So
yeah, if you look on some of the clips on the TikTok channel, I just post a video or 2 here and there. We covered the different subjects, and you can click on some of those clips and see what some of the episodes that we have.
I love that. So, and then I say here, you are married yourself with 2 kids. That's awesome. How long have you been married with your wife?
Oh, 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 17 years.
Well, then I guess you're a little bit qualified to speak on the subject, huh?
Yeah, I guess at that time when I first started the podcast, I think maybe 14 years at that time, somewhere around there. So then, since I've been doing it, the marriage goes and goes and goes. So you just continue to do it. And having the right partner is crucial. If your intention is to be in a marriage forever, if that's your goal, you want to have the right person. And if you don't, like I said, it can be very difficult, but I was fortunate. I did get somebody very good, and we're still hanging in there, making it work. I always say, going back to what you were saying before about how the aesthetics and all that stuff changes. I'll tell to the audience, I'm in my mid 50s now. At one point, I was an attractive man. Now I kind of just look like a troll. But even still, that's why it's so important to get the right person that you're going to stay with, because they love you through the good times and the bad, basically.
Yeah, and like I like when when people, like you can always find people too that like it's important, I think, to find people that like that share your same values. Like if you're outside, like the aesthetic is important to you, like if you like to work out and go to the gym and things like that, then find someone else that does that, because that, you don't have to have everything in common with your partner, of course, all of that, but like, the things that are important to you, I think that it's important to share,
Yeah, the aesthetics and all that stuff. Some people, like some women like height, some but they'll say these different things, but that doesn't I just tell women all the time, height doesn't pay the bills. Height isn't gonna understand some of the things you're going through. It's just an aesthetic, and it's something that men, we really don't have any control over. Like, me, I'm about 5'11", but my brother's 6'3". We got the height. What do you want me to do? That's just how things work out. So it's just life, and that's what you just got to deal with that. And people have to accept it. Understand that everything isn't going to be perfect or exactly the way you want it. And if you're waiting for that, you're going to be waiting a very, very long time.
Yes. Hold on, okay. I'm dropping everything. My tablet was about to die. I tried to plug in the phone and it friggin' just everything fell off. All right.
It's fine.
All right, there we go. All right, so I know that you talked earlier about how you're growing up in New York and stuff, and how that I love that story too that you told about the basketball game. Like that resonated. It's so crazy how 4 of you, you know what I mean? 4 of you and only one of you kind of succeeded or made it out. And that's awful. And, and it's crazy too, because especially back then, like recovery is like, I know you've seen in my room and on the TikTok, like recovery is the new vibe now, but like, before there, like recovery was not as accessible and promoted and accepted even and understood. So like, I can only imagine, cause you've been at this for a long time now. So you've kind of been through it the whole time. And it's definitely on the up now.
Yes, it's doing. I mean, I've experienced a whole bunch of different things. I've in this journey of being a substance abuse counselor for 16 years, basically. Unfortunately, I've had to seen some traumatic events, traumatic things that played out with people who were once on my caseload. But I've also seen some great stories from it. I've seen some really, really good things happen from people who were down and out and were in bad shape and ended up doing extremely well in recovery, and actually ended up working in the field when they got out and went home. It took them a while. They got a little bit of certifications done, and then they're helping others. So when I see stuff like that and hear them sometimes tell me that they parroted and echoed some of the things that I told them, I know that this is worth it. Like, if even, I've counseled thousands of inmates over the course of that period of time. But if I always say, if I got 100 or 200 that where it stuck and it really stuck and they were able to share it with other people, and I feel like I did what I was supposed to do. Whether it was perfect or not, it wasn't perfect, but I felt like I did it, to where I reached enough people to where it did help others outside of just themselves. It helped people, that they might have been going through, that might have, family members might have been going through recovery. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I read a passage. I do on TikTok, the reading out of that book every day. And today it said, one of the lines in the passage, it said, God uses broken people to fix broken people. And I thought that was really awesome. Like,
that's true. One thing I would say to the people who are going through treatment is, I would always say to them, I would put them in situations where they had to be the counselor and they had to counsel other people. And I said, to be honest with you, all of y'all can do this better than I can if you set your mind to it, because you know what that person is going through. Yeah. When they are they're being manipulative, when they're not being honest, what they're going through. So you maybe be able to pick up on a few more cues than I can. So I always say, people who are going through recovery and completed recovery and are, still in recovery can make some of the better counselors, just simply because they are able to pick up on some of those cues, like I was saying.
Like to understand, and you're more apt to like know if someone's like bullshitting or I made that same excuse.
Yes, because you know all of the tricks.
Yeah, I love it. That's it. I am considering pursuing my CADC, and that's what it is in Kentucky. And because I'm certified peer support already, and I have I've been taking like some classes. I don't know if I'm going to continue to do it or not, but because I'm just pursuing other things. But like, I really can see how like I don't know, like how, someone in addiction really, like, I really love that. I've had counselors that are in addiction or in recovery and are not. And, both people have very valuable things to come to the table. But like, I really love it when people turn their lives around. Like I know I had my very first podcast episode was with a girl that was in recovery, and she is now a counselor. And I said, I feel like you're like the boss of recovery. Like you turned addiction and, it makes us its slave, if you will. And then like you've now turned it around and you're like making your living, fighting this disease every day, helping people. You know what I mean? And I said, that's just amazing. So I have so much respect.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I get it. Yeah. And like I said, they make some of the better peer counselors and things to that effect. They do a good job with that. So I tell people, if you are in recovery, it doesn't necessarily have to be a passion, but if you are in recovery and you do want to help somebody, go ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah. I know you talked about that you counsel male and female inmates of all custody levels.
Yes.
Did was it challenging for you at all to counsel women, or did you have any issues ever? I know
with women, actually, it's going to sound funny, but with women, it's actually easier to counsel women than it is the men, because the men don't always open up. Women, they got a story to tell, so they're going to tell their story. And so it was like when I was running groups with the women, my job was just to keep them on the field, because they were going everywhere. I was just like a sort of a referee trying to reel everything in, but they weren't afraid to speak and to talk about some of the stuff they went through. With the men, you sometimes have to pull it out of them, and they only do it when they feel comfortable. So I'll try to make the environment of treatment like just we're having a conversation just on a hot summer day, sipping on our back porch, drinking lemonade kind of thing. And I think when I did it that way, they would open up more. And it's so funny with male groups, there's usually one or two people in the group who's somewhat of an alpha, and the group kind of takes on their personality. So if you have a good person in that capacity, it sort of makes everything go along. If it's a bad person, then the group might not be good. So most of the male groups were good, but there's always a few that would not be so good just because of the person that was in that role. But with the women, it never was an issue, because they wanted to talk. They wanted to tell their story. So it was a lot easier. Women.
I love this. I'm so my co-host James, and how he did a lot of stuff inside the prison when he was in there. I'm excited for him to see this episode. I don't know if he's watching live right now, but I'm really excited for him to hear this story, because I didn't realize that I knew you were a counselor and all that. I guess I never even realized until we spoke on the phone the other day that you worked in the prison system. So I really I love that, because it's counselors are great and all things, but for you to work with justice impact individuals, like that takes, to go into the prisons. A lot of people have fear, and that's, completely justified. I know things happen a lot, but like, I really, that's amazing, for you to hear what, God had planned for you, and to see it through for 20 some years, or 16 years, you said, right? And
16 years of being a counselor, but 26 total working in the prison system.
In the prison. Yeah. See, that's amazing. That's a lot. What did you do there before you were a counselor?
Okay. I started off as a correction officer, and at that point, when I first got hired, I was just looking for a job. I just need a job to pay the bills, kind of thing. A friend of mine said, "Hey, you were in the military. Why don't you apply and become a correction officer?" I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." Didn't think anything of it. About 8 months later, they called me back. Went in for an interview. Went in for a second interview. I just asked them. I says, "Do you know if I got the job or not?" Because no one said anything to me. And the HR person says, "Oh, you're going to start in 2 weeks." I'm like, "Really?" I said, "I don't even live in this state." So I had to move. I had to move to the state. It was just one state over, but I had to literally move just to get to start the job within that 2 week period. And I started off as a correction officer. I did that. And then I was just a generic counselor for about a year to 18 months. And then I got the substance abuse counseling thing.
When you were just, so you already had your counseling degree when you got the generic counseling?
No, I got that because I was, I take that back. I did. I had the master's degree at that point when I got that. Yes, you're right. I'm just trying to go back in time here. I did have the master's degree at that point, so I got the counseling position. Yes.
That's awesome.
At that point, yeah.
Do you have like a favorite success story you can share with us of your inmates?
Inside of the institution, there's so many. I really there's so many that I don't think I can narrow it down to one, but there was one inmate that I was a problem child as soon as he came into the program, constantly. So I started talking to him. He ended up being on my caseload. And I said, look, you're not going to make it through this program unless you're going to have to change up what you're doing. I said, you're not going to make it through the program. And so he started to listen to me a little bit more. And he said, if you give me a job, he says, I'll stay in the program, because he was going to quit. And so I said, I'll see what I can do. So I got him a job as my orderly, where he, had to clean my office whenever I needed something done. He had to come running this, that, and the other. I got him the job. He stayed in the program, worked on it, I had set up a Gavel Club, which is an affiliate of Toastmasters for public speaking. I got him to spearhead that. He did that, completed 10 speeches that was required for Toastmasters, got a certificate from them, got out, and got a job and started working. He left me this long letter that he went and typed up in the education department, just basically saying he never thought he would do the stuff that he did. He wanted to thank me, and he basically said I was the closest thing to a father he ever had. So that was one. Another one was, he was a gang member. He was the head of the gang, and he was in the program. And he told me, he said, what you're doing, what you're trying to do is help me is fine. He says, but he says, the gang comes first. Basically, he says, so since I'm the leader, I'm the head of it, if something goes down, we got to shut this down, basically. I said, well, why don't we just take it day by day, and let's just get better, and let's get better. And we did. And he didn't quite make it to the end, but he said, I am 10 times better. He says, I'm not the same person that I was prior to coming to the program. He says, I'm totally different, and I look at things differently now. And he basically, in so many words, indirectly said that he didn't want to do the gang stuff no more. And so I guess that was a success story as best as you can get it. But those were probably two that I can think of right off the top of my head. But there's a whole bunch. There's hundreds that I could tell you.
I know, it's not like a traditional success, happy ever after fairy tale, yes. But a huge success. And it's untelling the lives that you may have changed or impacted by just giving him the tools to kind of be a better person, and whatever it is that you taught him to think and stop. You could have potentially saved him, stopped him from making rash decisions. Which, if he is the head of a gang, his rash decisions could be fatal. So yeah. That's awesome. That is a big success story. I love that. So I know that the last thing that I want to kind of ask about is that you said you counseled inmates of all custody levels. Were you there ever a time where you were put in danger, a dangerous situation or anything like that?
I was essentially involved in one sort of big dangerous situation, but by the time I arrived, it was somewhat under control. But it was just basically a big, huge fight. It's the best way to describe it. Where some inmates ended up in the hospital, and it was pretty serious. But fortunately, nobody lost their life. So that's always a blessing. So, but yeah, that was probably the most worst. In 26 years, I never was physically assaulted. I had the worst thing that ever happened to me is somebody was mad because I didn't give them enough food. They were in the special housing unit, and they basically threw the food back at me. But that was probably the only time I was, if you want to use the word assaulted, was just I was assaulted with food, not with bodily harm. So, but a lot of it, to be honest with you, is communication, how you talk to people. If you treat them with dignity and respect, they would do the same to you. When I worked in the institution, especially with the males, even in the higher security levels, I never felt like I was at risk, because I knew that if something ever happened to me where, I had a problem with an inmate or this, that, and the other, there would be at least 10 other inmates that would come in and jump in. I knew for a fact. So I never, ever worried about safety. And now people say, well, that's kind of crazy. It's true, because I knew that if something did happen, I literally, before the staff could arrive, the inmates would help me.
That's awesome. So, that's awesome that you connected with them on that level to where you knew that they had you. That's awesome. That speaks to me, that really speaks to your character and stuff as a counselor, that you didn't place yourself above them. You know what I mean? That you're they were your buddies in a sense. You know, of course I know that
it's a relationship. It's a respect thing. You know, they knew that what I expected of them. They knew that I was, you know, don't cross me and do things, you know, that you're not supposed to do. And it was a respect thing. You know, like I treated them how I would want to be treated if I was in their shoes. Okay. So if I treat them like that, then in turn, I get treated, you know, respect what I'm trying to do here inside the institution. And that worked good for me. That worked the best for me. And so I always tell people, if you're going to be in that environment, go into that assumption, and then it'll be a lot easier for you, because I never was, you know, over the top or was a yeller or screamer or any of that type of stuff. But if they did something wrong, or they double crossed me, or they did things, they had something coming to them if they did, and they knew. So it was like a respect thing. So it really played itself out well.
Yeah, give respect to get respect, right?
Yeah.
And that
you could say it that way. Yes.
Especially in like the prison system, like that really is like, it's so important to them. Like it's so cool for them to get that, you know, to get that respect. And so like, you know, the fact that you went there, and I guarantee that had, you know, much to do with your, you know, your success getting through to people. So that's really awesome. Did you counsel people like that were like on death row, that were like with like
life
sentences?
No, I never counseled anyone on death row. Now I visited a death row in a different state, but I never had to counsel any death row inmates. No. When I say all custody levels, like death row is sort of its own separate thing. So you don't, 95% of, or maybe 99% of people who work inside of a prison are not going to come in contact with death row inmates usually, because it's such a, you know, they're in their own isolated area usually.
Did you counsel people with like large, really big sentences, long time?
Yes. I've counseled people who had life sentences, counseled people who had 30, 35 years. Yeah, that, yes. But not death row inmates.
Did people that had like life sentences, did like were there any like challenges specifically with it, or no, just kind of?
No, because I think most of them had, at that point, when you're doing that much time, it's more like you want to be comfortable while you're there. So as long as they were comfortable, they were fine. As long as they, you know, they lived in a certain area, they liked it, they had a job, and they made a certain amount of money inside of the institution, you know, that was their happiness. So as long as they had that going on, they were fine. You know, they were okay. But yeah, as long as I never really had a problem with an inmate who had a life sentence. They're generally the ones who are a little bit more subdued because they just have come to grips with doing the time.
Yeah.
You know, so yes. So that they're not that bad. They actually work. If with them, they just want a good routine. You know, I get up, shower, go to work, come home. They want it to be like a routine. And so if they had that, they were happy.
That's awesome. I was like, in my head, I was thinking that like they would be like, what's the point? You know, like if they're going to be there.
No, not really. Not because a lot of times when you get them, they're a little bit older, you know, so they're not as the younger inmates tend to be, you know, give you most of the issues per se, but only in, you know, as they age, they calm down. But for the most part, yeah, they're the ones who are doing life are generally not going to be much of a problem, you know, unless, like I said, now there could be instances where they can be, but I didn't have to, when I worked with them, I didn't have a problem.
So we talked about, you gave us a couple of your success stories. Did you have, what were some of your like major challenges that you had when you first, maybe at the first or just in general at all, like some of the bigger challenges that you had during your career?
Learning how to do drug treatment initially, because I didn't really know, and I was trained, so I learned how to do it. But then I was fortunate enough to have a supervisor who let me kind of do it the way I wanted to do it, the way it would make sense, for someone like me, using real life experiences from, when I grew up in different things and sharing things like that. That made it a little bit easier. He gave you that room to do that. And so I could get creative and innovative in treatment. I could come up with things that he would allow me to do. I would just run it by him. He'd say, that sounds good. Go ahead and do it. And if it was something that he felt was too far out of bounds, he'd say, no, don't do that. But but he gave me that leeway, and it helped. It really, really helped, because as I was learning and training and doing all the other stuff, people, some of the inmates would look forward to coming to group because we would do some of these different things. So it was, the challenge was, I would say for me, that first year, because I was still learning the job. But after I got my foot in, I was enjoying it. I loved it. Yeah.
Awesome. So can you share with us like maybe one of your little like unique exercises that you're talking about, like something different that you did?
Yeah, I did the one with the ones I shared with you with the girls. Another one I would do is I would put them in groups of 3. And I did that because I had a college professor when I was in grad school. He said they would do that at Harvard sometimes, and we would make them go through the group as a group of 3. So I would put them in situations and scenarios where they had to respond or act to the situation. How would they handle a situation? So how do you handle you being in here, and the woman who has your child or children is remarried now and is with somebody else, and they're disciplining your child or they're putting your child on punishments? How do you handle that? What are you going to do? What are some things that you can do? Different things your son might be using now. You may have a son or a daughter that's using. How are you going to handle it when you get out? You're going to be getting out in 6 months. What are you going to do when you get out?
And they had to like discuss as a group of 3 and come up with an answer.
Yes. Oh, nice. And then the other they would have to come up with an answer, and then the other group members would critique them and ask them questions about why they came up with the answer.
Nice.
Why would you do that? Why would you try something different? And so that would get them. I wanted them to solve the problems. So they would have to come up and say, and the other inmates could jump in and say, no, that's not right, this, that, and the other. And that allowed them to sort of learn how to, handle difficult situations, because they're used to handling things sometimes with violence. And I'm saying, no, there's another way you can do this. There's other ways you can do this to where everyone can benefit. And so they would have to come up with those solutions. So I would make them do that a lot. Like that would be almost every group we did that.
I love that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't have any more questions. If you have anything else that you want to share,
I think we covered quite a bit. So it was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I know. I was nervous where like, this is my first episode I know I did an episode with a counselor before that wasn't, but we did like on the science of addiction, kind of like we had a plan going in. But so this was like my first episode with somebody that wasn't necessarily in recovery. And so I was a little bit nervous, but it went really well. I really loved it. Is anybody on TikTok, anybody watching, anybody have any questions for Mr. AJ? If not, we will let him go. I don't see any questions. Well, thank you so much for being here. I will send you a link to this once I get it all edited and get ready to publish the episode, so you can just kind of have it. I really, really appreciate you being here. And maybe everyone's just saying thanks on my friend Rachel, she's a counselor. She said I need to know him. He comes in our TikTok sometimes, Rachel. I'll send you his little TikTok handle. You can follow.
Yeah, tell her she wants to send me a message or anything like that. I'll respond back to her. And yes, if she wants to, reach out, I like to have guests people who are in recovery, but are in relationships. and just tell us how that's working. So I look for people like that who are, they make good guests. So if you can have
her
someone like that.
relationship actually would be a good story because they were together. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel. I think they were together at one point before, and then had split up, and then now they're back together again. Like I can't really be sure of the details, but like I think that would be a good story because they're they're really good together. He's good to her. So yep, she said I'm right. So yeah, so that would be great. Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love it connecting, and maybe we can figure out a time for you to come back. You are a great guest.
Oh yeah, anytime you need me, just you got my info now. Just reach out. I will. I love what you're doing. I think you're grabbing it by the horns and you're running with it. I love that. And the people you have coming on your panels and everything, I think they're really good. And like I said, I've been kind of laying back a little bit because I want to hear what they have to say. And I didn't want to just jump on in as a counselor and tell people you need to do this, that, and the other. I just wanted them to be able to share. And then if they have a question for me or something that may be able to help them, I can jump in and chime in. But a lot of times when you are doing some of them, I might be there. I'm just listening in the background sometimes.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. And I appreciate, and I think that's another thing that makes a great counselor is that, like you see, like I'm just kind of sitting back and listening and getting a feel for, for us and our answers and like what, and I that's awesome because sometimes people, educated people think they have all the answers, and
yes.
nobody has all the answers. Yeah.
Listen, I just say really quick before we go is just look, sometimes I learned so much about myself counseling people. It's unbelievable. So we don't have all the answers. We find new answers every day when you're counseling because there's new things that happen that we were totally unaware of, and we find out so many different things with it. So we don't have all the answers. We have some answers, and we are learning every day as counselors, not just someone in recovery. As counselors, we're learning every day.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
I'll see you around.
Yes, I'll see you. I'll be listening in the background there. I might jump on a panel or two here and there, but I'll be listening. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
I really feel it's my time, think it's my year, yeah. I really feel it's my time, think it's my year, yeah. I really feel it's my time, think it's my year, yeah. I really feel it's my time, think it's my pen ready. Used to hold myself back, my self-esteem been patted. Gotta keep on chugging, ran through everything.